The Hobbit, a sleepy bedtime summary. There is a place in the world, a very comfortable, very quiet, very perfectly pleasant place, called the Hill, and beneath the hill there is a hole, and in that hole there lives a hobbit. His name is Bilbo Baggins, and it is important that you understand from the very beginning how deeply, sincerely, completely uninterested Bilbo Baggins is in adventure. His front door is round, painted green, with a shiny brass knocker right in the middle. His pantry is always full. His armchair by the fire is always warm. His pipe is always near at hand. And that, as far as Bilbo is concerned, is exactly the way things should be, forever and ever and ever. The Shire where Bilbo lives is a drowsy sort of land, rolling green hills, warm yellow lights in round windows as evening comes on. The smell of bread baking and pipe smoke drifting out of doors left open in the long summer afternoons. Hobbits, you should know, are small folk, not much taller than your knee, with large, leathery feet that they never bother to put shoes on, because their feet are naturally tough and covered in a nice thick layer of curly hair. They are not magical. They do not go on quests. They do not slay dragons. They eat 7 meals a day and go to bed early, and they are absolutely fine with this arrangement. But one morning, a very fine and quiet morning in late spring, just the sort of morning when nothing at all ought to happen, a wizard appears at Bilbo's gate. He is an old man with a tall pointed blue hat, a long grey cloak, a silver scarf and an immensely long staff. His bushy white eyebrows stick out from under the brim of his hat like friendly caterpillars. His name is Gandalf, and he has come looking for someone to go on an adventure. Bilbo, being a polite sort of hobbit, invites him for tea. Then, being a sensible sort of hobbit, he quickly tries to get rid of him. But Gandalf carves a strange mark on Bilbo's beautiful green door, a mark that means burglar, though Bilbo doesn't know this yet. And the next morning, before Bilbo has quite had time to eat a proper second breakfast, the dwarves begin to arrive. They come in 2s and 3s and then all at once, 13 of them in total, stomping their boots on the mat and hanging their hoods on Bilbo's pegs and helping themselves to his cold chicken and his seed cake and his scones, and his 3 kinds of cheese and his pork pies and his salad, and quite a lot of his wine. Their names are Fili and Kili, who are young and bright-eyed, Dwalin and Balin, one fierce and one kindly, Owen and Glowin, who are always bickering, Dory, Norri and Ori, who keep to themselves, Bifur, Boffer and Bomber, Bomber being so plump he barely fits through the round door, and their leader, Thorin Oakenshield, who arrives last of all and does not wipe his boots on the mat and takes the best chair by the fire as though it is only natural that he should. Thorin is no ordinary dwarf. He is a king without a kingdom, the grandson of Thror, who was king under the mountain at the great dwarf city of Erebor, until the dragon came. The dragon's name is Smaug, and some decades ago he smelled the gold that the dwarves had piled up beneath the lonely mountain, and he came sweeping out of the north in a river of fire and smoke and screaming, and he took the mountain for himself and killed or scattered all the dwarves within it, and has been sleeping on their gold ever since, which dragons find deeply satisfying. Thorin wants his mountain back. He wants the treasure of his people. He wants the great halls and the deep mines and the legendary Arkenstone, the heart of the mountain, a gem of such breathtaking beauty that no mortal words quite manage to capture it, though it is described as a globe of white light, as though a piece of the heart of the world had been polished smooth and set in the dark of the earth to glow forever. And he has a map and a key, The map was made by his grandfather, and it shows a secret door into the mountain. The key is small and silver. And Gandalf, for reasons of his own, reasons that have to do with the state of the world and the creeping darkness in the east, and matters far beyond the scope of this bedtime story, has decided that what this expedition needs is a burglar. And the burglar he has chosen is Bilbo Baggins, who has never stolen anything in his life, and is currently standing in his own hallway in his dressing gown, having forgotten to offer anyone a second helping of biscuits. The dwarves are sceptical. They look at small, round, comfortable Bilbo, and they do not see a burglar. They see a frightened hobbit in nightclothes who smells faintly of pipe smoke and scones. But Gandalf insists, and there is something in Bilbo that, despite every sensible, reasonable, comfortable thing about him, stirs when he hears Thorin speak of the mountain. Something old and adventurous, something from his mother's side of the family, the Tooks, who were always considered a bit unsettling by the rest of the Shire. And the next morning, when the dwarves and the wizard have packed up and ridden away on their ponies without him, Bilbo finds himself running down the lane in a panic without so much as a pocket handkerchief to catch them up. The journey begins in the pleasant green country of the Shire, and almost immediately it stops being pleasant. It rains. The ponies are miserable. The camping food is far inferior to anything in Bilbo's pantry. Then one evening, when everyone is cold and damp and hungry and cross, a light appears in the distance, and they discover it belongs to 3 trolls, enormous, ugly, slow-witted creatures called Tom and Bert and William, who sit around a fire arguing about the best way to cook dwarves. Bilbo, attempting to prove himself as a burglar, creeps up on them to steal something, anything, and manages to get caught instead. And then the dwarves come rushing in to rescue him and also get caught, one by one, until all 13 of them are stuffed into sacks, and the trolls are debating whether to roast them or sit on them. It is, by any measure, a catastrophic start to the adventure. They are saved by Gandalf, who appears at the crucial moment and begins throwing his voice around, making Tom argue with Bert and Bert argue with William, until the sky begins to lighten with the dawn. And when the first ray of sun catches the trolls, they turn to stone, as all trolls must when the day comes, and stand there in the wood to this day, great lumpen grey shapes that hikers occasionally trip over, mistaking them for oddly shaped boulders. In the trolls' cave they find gold and swords. Gandalf takes 2 elvish blades, long and sharp and blue in the dark when goblins are near. Thorin takes a great elvish sword with a blade that gleams, and Bilbo finds a small knife in a leather sheath, more of a letter opener, really, by dwarf or human standards, but a respectable short sword by Hobbit reckoning. He names it Sting, though not yet. That comes later. Their next stop is Rivendell, the last homely house east of the sea, which is the home of the elves and the most beautiful place that any of the company has ever seen or is likely to see. It is built along a valley where a river runs and waterfalls tumble, and the air is always warm and the light is always golden. And the elves there have lived so long that they find almost everything amusing, including dwarves, and they stand in the doorways of their halls and sing teasing songs about Thorin's gold lust and Bilbo's round belly, which the dwarves do not find amusing at all. But the Lord of Rivendell is Elrond, and he is ancient and wise and kind, and he reads the runes on Thorin's map, moon runes, written in the old way, visible only when the moon of the right shape shines through them at the right time of year. The runes say, "Stand by the grey stone when the thrush knocks, and the setting sun with the last light of Durin's day will shine upon the keyhole." Durin's day is the first day of the dwarves' new year, when the last moon of autumn and the first sun of winter appear together in the sky. It is rare, they must not miss it. Refreshed and resupplied, they leave Rivendell and climb up into the misty mountains. The mountains are cold and grey and vast. Stone giants throw boulders at each other in the storm as a form of recreation. The company takes shelter in what seems to be a dry cave, and wakes in darkness as the floor opens and they all fall down, down, down into the tunnels beneath the mountain. And the goblins have them. The goblins are quarrelsome and violent and numerous, and they live in a great underground cavern lit by red fire, where their great goblin sits on a high throne and screeches orders at everyone. They capture the dwarves, and they would certainly have done something dreadful with them had Gandalf not appeared out of nowhere in a flash of blinding light and struck the great goblin dead on his throne. And then in the chaos and darkness the whole company goes running and stumbling through the goblin tunnels. And somehow, in the shouting and the tripping and the falling, somehow Bilbo loses his grip and falls and cracks his head on a stone. And when he wakes up, he is alone. Alone and in the dark and very far underground, with no idea which way to go. His hand, reaching out in the darkness, touches something small and cold and round on the cave floor. A ring. A little golden ring, perfectly smooth. He puts it in his pocket without thinking much about it. This is a thing that will matter enormously later, but for now it is just a ring on a cold stone floor, and Bilbo has more pressing concerns. Namely that he can hear something moving nearby in the dark, something breathing, and then a pair of pale eyes appears in the gloom, and a thin, hissing voice says, "What has it got in its pockets is?" The creature is Gollum. Once, long ago, he was something like a hobbit, or a creature related to hobbits, living by a river and catching fish. But he found the ring long, long ago, and it has been eating away at him ever since, keeping him alive and twisting him, pulling him down into the dark roots of the mountain, where he paddles his little boat on the underground lake and catches fish and occasionally eats goblin. He calls the ring his precious. He loves it and hates it and talks to it in the dark. He finds Bilbo and they strike a bargain, a riddle contest. If Gollum wins, he eats Bilbo. If Bilbo wins, Gollum shows him the way out. Back and forth they go in the dark, what has roots as mountains, what hangs always 30 white horses on a red hill. The riddles are ancient and wonderful, the kind that feel like they've been in the world forever. And Bilbo, running out of ideas and frightened nearly to pieces, blurts out, "What have I got in my pocket?" Which is not technically a riddle at all, but Gollum allows it. The answer, of course, is the ring. And Gollum does not know this, but he suspects it and goes to his island to check his hiding place. And when he finds the ring gone, he shrieks with a sound that echoes off every stone in the mountain. "Thief, thief, Baggins, we hates it forever." He realizes Bilbo has the ring, and he chases him, and in his desperation Bilbo slips the ring on his finger and vanishes. The ring makes its wearer invisible. This is its simplest and most obvious gift, and Bilbo doesn't fully understand it yet, but it carries him invisible through the tunnels and past the goblins at the gate and out, stumbling into the cold open air on the other side of the mountain. where the sun is coming down in long slants through the pine trees and the whole eastern world is spread out below, and Bilbo Baggins is free. He finds the dwarves and Gandalf where they've been waiting and worrying, and they are relieved and rather astonished, and Bilbo finds, to his own astonishment, that he is rather pleased with himself, though he doesn't quite mention the ring. They have not long to rest. The wargwolves have gathered great grey savage things that serve the goblins, and they tree the company in the pines, and the goblins come pouring out of the mountain gates to help, and the fire begins creeping up through the dry grass toward the trees, and then the eagles come. The eagles are enormous, ancient, proud, and they do not particularly care about dwarves or hobbits or the concerns of small people, but they do not like goblins and they do not like wargs, and so they sweep down out of the cold sky and snatch up the company one by one and carry them away over the mountains, and deposit them on the Carrack, a great flat rock above the river, and fly away again as dawn breaks over the eastern lands. Below the Carrack lives Beorn, a man who can change his shape, a man by day, a great black bear by night. He is massive and strange and not always friendly, but he is an enemy of goblins and of wargs, and Gandalf tells the dwarves' story to him cleverly, in pieces, adding more dwarves as he goes so that Beorn's curiosity keeps him from getting bored or angry. And in the end Beorn houses them and feeds them enormously and loans them ponies for the road to the forest. The forest is Mirkwood, and it is the longest and darkest and most disheartening part of the journey. Once it was called Greenwood the Great and was pleasant enough, but something dark has taken root in its southern reaches, something that will not be named until much later and in other stories. And now the trees press close and block the sky, and the path is narrow, and the air has a thick, close, slightly wrong feeling that makes even the bravest traveller want to turn back. Gandalf cannot go with them. He has other business, urgent and secret, and he leaves them at the edge of the wood with instructions: stay on the path. Whatever you see or hear, stay on the path. Do not drink from the streams. Do not eat any berries, do not stray. They stray. For days they walk in the gloom, eating their provisions, growing thinner and more discouraged. A stream crosses the path, an enchanted stream that causes forgetfulness and sleep, and they cannot find a boat, and when they finally manage to jump it, Bombur falls in and sleeps for days and must be carried, which is not easy, given Bombur's dimensions. The squirrels and rabbits of the forest are all black, which is unnerving. There are sounds in the dark, eyes in the branches. Then one night they see lights in the trees, warm, dancing lights and voices, and the smell of roasting meat, and despite Gandalf's warning they leave the path 3 times, because they are desperately hungry and desperately lonely, and the dark is very pressing. Each time they approach, the lights go out. Each time the company scatters. And on the 3rd occasion, when all the lights vanish at once and the dwarves come stumbling back through the dark to find each other, Bilbo reaches out and there is no one there at all, and he is alone again. He falls asleep in the dark and wakes with something wrapping silk around him, and above him in the branches, an enormous spider has him in a web and is preparing to eat him. This is where Bilbo names his little knife. He cuts himself free, he kills the spider, and he stands shaking in the dark and feels changed, braver, more himself. The knife gets a name, Sting, it feels right. He puts on the ring and goes hunting for the dwarves, and finds them hanging from the trees in cocoons, and leads the spiders away with taunts and stone throwing while the dwarves cut each other free. And then there is a great horrible battle in the dark with the giant spiders of Mirkwood. And they win, the dwarves and the Hobbit together. But when the spiders are driven back, they discover that Thorin is missing. He was taken not by spiders but by wood elves. The wood elves are not the wise and ancient elves of Rivendell. They are the elves of the deep forest, wilder and more suspicious, and their king is Thranduil, who has a fondness for jewels, a fondness that has soured his relationship with the dwarves in the past, and who locks Thorin in a comfortable but escape-proof cell and demands to know where the dwarves are going and why. Thorin, being Thorin, says nothing at all, with enormous dignity. One by one the other dwarves are captured, all except Bilbo, who puts on his ring and sneaks invisible into the elven halls, and spends several cold and miserable weeks sleeping on the floor and sneaking food from the kitchens, and trying to figure out how to get everyone out. The answer comes from the barrels. The wood elves trade with the humans of Lake Town and send empty barrels back down the river through a trapdoor in the floor of their halls. Bilbo figures out where the barrels go after they're emptied, and one night he gets all the dwarves out of their cells, 13 grumbling dwarves in the dark, following a voice they cannot see, and stuffs them into the empty barrels and sends them down through the trapdoor into the river below. It works. The barrels go bobbing down the river, some of them with dwarves inside getting thoroughly soaked, and Bilbo hangs on the outside of a barrel getting thoroughly soaked and somewhat battered. And they all wash up on the shores of the long lake, and there is Lake Town, which is a human settlement built on the water on wooden stilts. And its people remember the old songs about the king under the mountain and the return of the dwarves. And they welcome Thorin with great ceremony, and give the company rest and food and clothing and boats, and send them on their way toward the lonely mountain, which stands on the horizon like a dark tooth against the cold sky. The lonely mountain is exactly as lonely as it sounds. A single enormous peak rising from a barren plain of cold stone, ringed by the ruins of Dale, the human city that Smaug burned when he came for the gold, where broken towers and crumbled walls stand silent and empty in the wind. The dwarves are quieter here. Something is coming back to them that is almost like grief. They sail up the river in small boats and beach them and climb the stony slopes on foot. And they find the hidden door as Thrain's map says they will, a crack in the mountainside, invisible unless you know to look. And they sit there for days trying to work out how to open it, because there is no handle and no keyhole, and no amount of pushing or pulling or saying magic words seems to do anything at all. And then at the very last moment of Durin's day, when the sun is setting and the shadows are long and most of the company has given up and gone back down to the camp, Bilbo sits watching the light change on the stone, and a thrush comes and cracks a snail on the grey rock, and the last light of the evening sun hits a smooth patch of the door and a keyhole appears. Thorin puts in the key and turns it, and the door opens into the dark heart of the mountain. They send Bilbo in alone. This is somewhat unfair, but he is, after all, the burglar. And so he goes creeping down the long dark tunnel into the warmth and the red glow, and the sound, first barely audible and then enormous, the breathing of a sleeping dragon. Smaug is everything the stories promised and worse. He is vast and red gold. and he lies draped over a mountain of treasure that fills an entire cavern, gold coins and goblets and brooches and chains and an uncountable pile of gems. And on top of it all the dragon sleeps with one eye closed and the other eye not quite fully shut, because Smaug is never entirely asleep. The smell of the place is hot metal and old smoke and something like brimstone. The light comes from the dragon himself, from the slow glow of his scales. Bilbo takes a single gold cup, just one, just to prove he was there, and creeps back up to the door, and for a moment he thinks he has done it. Then Smaug wakes and finds the cup missing, and his roar fills the mountain and rolls out into the cold night air, and the company scrambles for the door and pulls Bilbo through, and the door slams shut, just in time, just barely, as a gout of flame explodes against the rock outside, and the stone cracks with the heat. They are trapped on the mountainside in a crack in the stone, while below them Smaug sets the whole slope ablaze. They huddle in the tunnel and wait for the mountain to stop burning. When things quiet down, Bilbo goes in again. This time he talks to Smaug, which is more dangerous than it sounds, because dragons are very clever conversationalists who say one thing and mean another, and Smaug is very interested in Bilbo, who is this creature who smells of Hobbit and Lake Town and elvish halls and the Shire. He cannot quite place the smell. And while they talk in riddles, Bilbo sees something, a bare patch on Smaug's belly near his left breast, where a scale has been missing for a very long time. This is the dragon's weakness, though Bilbo does not know how to use this information yet. A thrush is listening on the windowsill. This matters. It matters very much. Smaug, in a fury at Bilbo's clever evasions, goes roaring out of the mountain to destroy Lake Town, which he suspects is sheltering the dwarves, and which has been irritating him for years anyway. He comes out of the night sky over the water like a comet, setting the wooden houses ablaze, and the people scatter and the boats burn, and the master of Lake Town runs for it in the best boat with as much gold as he can carry. But there is a man named Bard, a bargeman, a grim and steady man who is descended from the old lords of Dale, and he has a black arrow that has never yet missed, and the thrush from the mountain comes and lands on his shoulder and whispers in his ear the secret Bilbo discovered. The bare patch, the left breast, the one place a shaft can reach the heart. And Bard draws his last arrow and fires into the darkness at the one black patch on the great red-lit underbelly of the dragon, and Smaug screams. He crashes into the lake. The water boils and steams around him, and after a long moment there is stillness, and the only sound is the water pouring back into the hole the dragon made, and Lake Town is half burned, and Smaug, the chiefest and greatest of calamities, is dead. Now here is where the adventure gets complicated, in the way that all adventures do when the exciting part ends and the much harder parts begin. With Smaug dead, the mountain is open. The treasure is there. And the treasure has been sitting under the mountain for decades, guarded by a dragon, dreamed about by dwarves and men alike, the subject of songs and longing across the whole north. And the question of who it belongs to is not simple. The dwarves go into the mountain and find it as they left it. All the halls and forges and deep chambers filled with the light of veins of gold in the walls and the piled treasure of generations. And Thorin goes a bit strange. This is called dragon sickness, and it is the treasure's fault as much as anything. The gold has a weight to it, a pull that the dwarves feel more than most, And Thorin begins counting and cataloguing and refusing to let anyone have anything until he has found the Arkan stone, which he has not found yet, which makes him more and more agitated. The men of Lake Town come to the mountain. They have lost their homes and their livelihood and many of their people to Smaug's attack, and they say, "Some of this treasure is ours, owed by the original agreements between the dwarves and the men of Dale, whose city was also destroyed." Bard says, "Give us what we are owed and something for the lake men who helped and who have lost everything." Thorin fortifies the mountain and refuses to speak. He sends for his cousins from the north more dwarves, an army of them, and prepares for war. The elves of Mirkwood also come, because Thranduil has old claims of his own and is not one to pass up an opportunity, and an army of elves pitches its tents alongside an army of men, and they wait outside the mountain in the cold autumn air, while inside it Thorin Oakenshield counts his gold and shouts about thieves. Bilbo has the Arkan stone. He found it in the deep treasury while Thorin was occupied elsewhere, and he has been carrying it in his pocket, and he has been watching Thorin grow colder and stranger day by day, and he does the bravest thing he has done yet, braver than facing trolls or goblins or Gollum or spiders or Smaug, which is to slip out of the mountain alone at night and go to Bard and Thranduil's camp and give them the Arkenstone to use as a bargaining piece. Thorin's rage when they produce it the next morning is tremendous. He calls Bilbo a thief and a traitor and a worm in armor. Bilbo stands there and takes it and does not say he is sorry, because he is not sorry, because he has seen enough of what the gold does to people, and he is very tired of it. Then the dwarves from the north arrive, and the mood turns dark and violent, and it seems that blood will be spilled on the threshold of the mountain, and all of it over gold. And then the sky goes dark, and the ground shakes, and the goblins and the wargs come pouring over the hills in a black flood, because they have heard about the death of the great goblin and they have come for revenge. And suddenly all the quarrelling sides remember that they have a common enemy. This is the battle of 5 armies, and it is terrible. Men and dwarves and elves fighting goblins and wargs on the slopes of the lonely mountain, and for a long time it looks very bad indeed. The goblins are too many, they are being pushed back, and then the eagles come again, Gwaihir the Windlord and all his people, swooping out of the sky, and Beorn comes too, Beorn in his bear shape, enormous and unstoppable, smashing through the goblin lines, and the tide turns. Bilbo is knocked unconscious early in the battle by a stone and spends most of it lying on the ground, which is undignified but safe. When he wakes up, it is over. The goblins are routed. The eagles are settling on the mountain top, and the dwarves are carrying Thorin Oakenshield out of the battle, and it is clear from the way they are carrying him that he is dying. Thorin asks for Bilbo, and when Bilbo comes, Thorin says he is sorry. He says there is more in Bilbo than he knew, more goodness, more real courage than in many who seem braver. He says that if more people valued home and simple things above gold, the world would be a merrier place. And then Thorin Oakenshield, son of Thrain, son of Thror, king under the mountain, dies. He is buried deep under the mountain with the Arkenstone on his breast, and the elvish sword Orcrist on his tomb, and the dwarves mourn him with songs that echo in the stone halls. Dain, Thorin's cousin, becomes king under the mountain. He honours all the agreements, pays Bard his share and more, pays the lakemen what they are owed. The treasure is divided fairly, and the Dale men use their portion to rebuild their city, and Lake Town is repaired, and the whole region begins to breathe again after the long fear of the dragon. Bilbo is offered a great portion of the treasure. He takes very little. 2 small chests, one of gold, one of silver, which can be loaded on a pony. That is enough. He does not need more than enough. He never did. Gandalf comes back looking tired but satisfied, and the 2 of them travel home together through Mirkwood, which feels less dark with Smaug gone and the shadow in the south reduced for the moment, and stop again at Beorn's house as the winter is turning, and Beorn gives them a great feast and sends them on their way with a laugh. They stay again in Rivendell as the winter thaws into early spring, and Elrond and Gandalf talk long into the nights about things Bilbo does not quite catch. Things about the darkness in the south and the old powers stirring and the years to come. These are things for other stories. Bilbo finds a quiet corner and writes some of what has happened in a small book and sleeps deeply in the warmth and is glad. He comes home to the Shire on a fine June morning, just as the sun is slanting warm and golden across the hill, and finds his house being auctioned off, because everyone had assumed he was dead and had not thought to wait, and the neighbours are bidding on his furniture and going through his pantry, and a distant cousin named Bilbo Baggins has already moved into 3 of his rooms and is extremely put out to find him alive. It takes some months to sort out the legal business. Some of his silver spoons are never recovered. He is never quite as respectable as he was before, not in the eyes of the Shire, where people mutter about his odd friends and his travelling, and the way he sometimes stands at the gate in the evenings looking east with a faraway expression. He is considered peculiar, which is the worst thing one can be in the Shire, but he finds he minds it less than he would have expected. His pantry is full again. His armchair is warm. His pipe is near at hand. And hanging on his wall there is a map of a distant mountain, and on a hook by the door there is a small knife in a leather sheath, and in a drawer somewhere there is a golden ring, smooth and plain, cold to the touch, that he found in the dark under the mountain, and that he has not thought much about since he came home, and that will not be important for a long, long time yet. He writes his book. He has his tea. He takes long walks in the afternoons and comes home as the light fades and the lamps come on in all the round windows of the hill, and he is content. He has seen the world's great dark places, and he has walked through them, and he is small and fond of second breakfast, and his feet are large and hairy, and he goes to bed early. And all of this is fine and good and more than enough. Gandalf visits him now and then. The dwarves visit too, Balin once, and Fili and Kili at midsummer one year, bringing presents and laughing too loudly, and eating everything in the pantry and singing long wandering songs late into the night. In the morning they are gone and the house is quiet, and Bilbo stands at the gate with his second cup of tea and watches the road run away into the east, and thinks about all the things that are out there beyond the horizon, the mountains and the dark woods and the strange, wonderful, terrible, enormous world. And then he goes back inside. And he is, all things considered, deeply and completely happy.